Welcome back to Indus Special. Now, Facebook recently announced that it is tightening its policies for political ads before the U.S. 2020 elections. These changes mean that advertisers now need to prove their identities to make the entire process of reaching out to Facebook users more transparent. We unpack the story and look at the real power of political ads on Facebook and what happens behind the scenes with ads and revenue that influences not just Facebook's users, but Facebook's own rules and policies. Joining us to talk about this today is Mr. Donohoe, CEO of Level Agency and the author of the CEO's Digital Marketing Playbook, joining us from Charleston. We're also joined by Ms. Saleha Zahid, digital rights advocate at Bolobi, a civil society organization geared towards advocacy, policy, and research in the areas of digital rights and civic responsibilities, joining us from Islamabad. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Mr. Donohoe, now going to you and just talking about what a political ad is and what that entails. Now, we know that Facebook's ad revenues are massive. That's the main source of how they earn revenue. Now, when we're talking about political ads, they also clumped ads related to social change, social issues, and several other things. Now, what would constitute as a political ad?
So in this particular case, a political ad as defined by Facebook would have something that has an outcome as relates to an election in terms of, I believe, their internal policies. But keep in mind, Facebook was tracking in terms of last year's top line revenue at about $56 billion. And even though these elections in the United States and internationally are profitable, we have to keep in mind that it is still not the lion's share of that overall revenue. And again, they only occur every other year, or obviously in the United States, every 2 to 4 years.
So talking a little more about the scope and how wide it is in these policies, are you saying that it will only be limited to election time and that's only related to U.S. elections?
So there's a bit of a loophole. Even though the primary regulations from an internal Facebook standpoint absolutely point that you have to identify if you're an official political group, there's a pretty big loophole. Mm-hmm. And the loophole is that if you are deemed what's called an advocacy group, if you're an advocacy group, you do not have to fall in line with those identification policies that were listed before. So it's very similar, I feel, to what has happened with what's called hard money versus soft money in American politics in the past 10 to 20 years, where dollars from official political groups are very heavily regulated, but things from what are called soft money places or political action committees are significantly less regulated. So Facebook, on one hand, is taking fairly aggressive steps to provide transparency and more information in terms of official political groups that advertise, but in terms of advocacy groups that could do the same thing, that could have the same message, the same intent, the same outcome, those are significantly less regulated by Facebook.
Right. Mr. Donohoe, talking more about opinion and the fact that Facebook might not be making the earnest effort that it should when we're talking about actually trying to curtail political influences. Now, it seems like from the statement released by Facebook itself that this policy will be restricted to the United States only. Is that true?
Initially, that is what is being communicated. I believe that while India, for example, has the largest singularity from a user base and a utilization standpoint at around 270, 290 million, the United States is around 190 and everyone else is significantly less. Even though there is a focus on utilization and active users, there is still a focus on revenue and money more than anything else. So number one, I would not be surprised if this is just a United States-centric play to, again, appease that court of public opinion. Then again, if from an automated logic standpoint, from an AI standpoint, I wouldn't believe that Facebook, just from an efficiency standpoint, would roll out unique AI regulations and rules, internal automated features that are country by country specific. If there would be one country that would receive a unique playbook or unique regulations, it would be the United States, only because of the revenue driven, not the users. Again, we have to be very careful that just because more people view or use or on a service doesn't mean there's more money coming from it. And just as an example, the United States, the digital advertising market is worth about $130 billion a year. That's the whole pie. That's Google, that's Facebook, that's everybody. So 130 billion. India, as an example, is about 6 billion. So even though there is 30 to 40% more users in India of Facebook than in the United States, obviously the opportunity for revenue and profit, it's still US focused.
Right. And now, Mr. Donohoe, unpack this story a little more and talk more about the connection of ad revenue and political biases. Now, time and time again, Facebook has been allegedly involved in censoring certain content over the other. There is a double standard to it, many people would say, something that constitutes as a hate speech in Facebook's policies for one country might not be the case applied to another as well. Now, regarding all of this, there is also claims coming in about how Facebook, and due to the fact that it does have a large market in India, as you've mentioned, not as big as the one it has in the US, but still it does. For that reason, specifically, Facebook has sided with India in certain manners when it comes to, for example, let's say Kashmir.
So I think there's a very good example here in the United States that would be relatable. There is the opinion of the Republican Party in the United States that Facebook would have a similar, India versus Pakistan bias, a Republican versus Democrat or liberal bias. And I want to be very, very clear. I strongly believe, and again, I'm fortunate to be in a position where my companies like mine are the pipeline of money. So we represent clients that spend millions of dollars. So I do see where the money goes. I want to be very clear. Facebook will, and Twitter and Google will take positions from a moral or ethical standpoint. They will make certain rules eventually when you start getting a lot of pressure in terms of the types of speech that are and are not allowed on the platform, both in terms of paid advertising and what we call organic. So keep in mind, just because I personally or you personally post something, that's not a paid ad. So keep in mind, paid advertising is different than stuff that individuals post. And in both cases, I do not believe it is possible, but it's so inefficient for, on a manual basis, country by country, for human beings, employees of Facebook, to start monitoring and curtailing or boosting certain content, either paid or organic. I do believe that there are what are called automated rules, where they are given giving the machine learning tools rules to follow, and those are very binary.
Mr. Donohoe, I'd like your response to those allegations that are made.
I believe that at the scale that we're talking, 290 million users, the quantity of content just in India, let alone the United States or globally, to the point that was just raised, while there are absolutely humans that are manually, ostensibly deciding or being the arbiter of what people see and don't see, I know definitively that the lion's share of actions that are taken are in the paid advertising realm. So I think a lot of the discourse, both in the United States and in Pakistan and in India, are when we talk about the bias, what we're talking about are typically what individuals like you or I post. Those things, there's such a massive volume. Even if you have 50,000 employees manually going through, those employees are going to be tasked for the paid advertising for very good reasons. Number one, you want to put human beings and work and focus on things that make you money as a company. And to the prior point, Facebook is very, very sensitive to their revenue. And number two, the scale in terms of how on a daily basis, just in India, to say nothing of the rest of the world, just to monitor what individuals, the 1.5 billion individuals post on a daily basis, that is significantly less monitored by humans. What is monitored often, for very good reasons, are the paid ads.
Right.
So I would agree with
Mr. Donohoe, just wrapping up with your last, what do you see now happening after this policy has been introduced? With all the dynamics at play, what do you see happening in terms of political content on Facebook?
Sure. In terms of not just political content, but from a paid advertising standpoint, any other topic, sensitive or not, here's where the rubber meets the road. It's the targeting data points that Facebook allows advertisers like my company and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others to access. So the data points about every human being. And that's where the real conversation and the real investigation should lie. And as an example, they, on a quarterly basis, either roll out or roll back different targeting features. As a few examples, a year ago, you could target by job title incredibly easily. Now it's much more difficult. And these small data points, whether it's political affiliation, job title, household income, net worth, those data points, whether it's to be weaponized for political purposes or weaponized for selling cars, those are the actual things that Facebook absolutely changes as they experience pushback or as they experience a really big potential in new revenue. So those are the data points, the targeting features that individuals like us, those are the things that make a difference in terms of what we see versus what we don't see. And the bottom line is, from a political discourse standpoint, they have definitively pulled back some targeting features, but certainly not all. And so I don't think this election coming up in America is going to be that significantly different in terms of the types of ads we see. Now, that might change in a few years.
Mr. Donohoe, now, sorry to cut you short there, but running out of time, those last comments were very striking, that the situation in these coming elections might not be that different because Facebook, with all the pushback that it's facing, it is making some changes, but just not enough that are needed. On that point, thank you so much, Mr. Thomas Donohoe, for joining us from Charleston. Thank you so much, Ms. Saleha Zahid, for joining us. And thank you, Ms. Shamaila Khan, for joining us. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.